Hello, I'm Ellen Benz coming today from my home in Wheaton, Illinois in the USA. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from away from my home, just outside Cambridge in the UK. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
Today's episode, we are taking one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's April 15th, 2026, which is tax day here in the United States. Not a fun day. Not a fun day.
It's not the end of the tax year, is it?
No, it's
the
just when
calendar year.
taxes are due. Yes.
Right, because we've just started here in the UK our new tax year, which always starts on the 6th of April. It sounds like the most odd day to begin. It's got
Yes,
something
it
to do with
is.
Easter and the way that in times of old, farm laborers used to have a time when they used to get their earnings or something around this time of year.
Interesting.
And I don't know how it all worked out, but it's not very good from an accountant's point of view, because of course most software assumes at least start of month, if not start of year.
Very interesting. I learned something today. Thank you, Clive.
So what happens with tax day in the US?
It's the day your taxes are due. They have to be postmarked by tonight.
We have a dog just arrived as we are due to record. I closed the door.
That's okay. Well. We love her. We love our four-legged friends.
So that's involved Dylan as well. So, like we're sure most of our listeners, we've been following and have been deeply moved by fast-changing events in the Gulf, and indeed fast-changing events in the White House, we have to say, during the weeks since 28th of February. It's over a month now, isn't it? 6 weeks, when US and Israeli forces began their strikes on Iran, which of course triggered the start of what has become an explosive situation that quickly escalated into war. Currently, as we recall, there is a very fragile, and I think we have to say partial, ceasefire in place. And virtually every new day, there seems to be some significant new event or change in rhetoric relating to this that we might need to urgently respond to. Not to mention the countless ripple effects that are having profound consequences for so many. This is, of course, something that we can do in the moment as these, the daily news occurs, and that's something we do very often in the Facebook group. Of course, we respond to daily events, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to know how we respond to the situation as a whole, with such a changing picture, and the especially erratic and unpredictable position-taking, actions, and rhetoric coming out of the White House, accepting these spontaneous responses to know where to focus our attention and prayers. Especially since we know that intention holding is most effective when it's very specific, in other words, moving beyond general desires for peace, something we aim to involve ourselves in as a collective. This becomes more difficult. We've gone through this topic, haven't we, already a number of times? When this started, we were saying, well, shall we focus on the Strait of Hormuz, for example, which perhaps was not, its significance was not as well appreciated by many as it will be now. So an aim to get specific intentions and to understand a context we can relate to, rather than offering very generalized prayer, is of course central to what we seek to do with the topics we cover in this podcast. And we've been finding it hard to keep up with what's happening, and finding that material we want to deal with quickly becomes old news. So just what can we do to hold intention in such a fluid situation? This is our focus for this episode, and obviously very specifically focusing on what's going on in the Gulf. We'll move pretty quickly to considering some specific areas for our intention holding, rather than spending too much time setting context about what's happening, most of which we're sure will be known to our listeners.
Because we hear plenty about it, right?
We do.
useful starting point might be to simply offer loving kindness for anyone and anything that is affected by the current tension. This is, according to most faith traditions, to unconditionally desire the highest good for both all who are impacted by and those who are spurring the conflict. Loving kindness brings us to holding intention or praying from the character of what many of us know as divine, to invite him or her, or however you refer to the God of your understanding or the higher power of your understanding, to be not only with, but within us, and in partnership to will the highest good in keeping with the attributes of God's character. Such things may include mercy for all who suffer, wisdom for leaders, diplomats, and military decision makers, and protection for people of all backgrounds, irrespective of their nationality or political ideology. We've spoken about the nature of loving kindness or meditation before, and noted the importance of embracing loving kindness for ourselves before being able to will this for others. The practice may extend to willing this unconditional love to individuals whose views, words, and actions we find disturbing or distasteful. No one is excluded from the focus for this flow of energy. So this can be hard, of
Mm,
course,
mm,
especially when we find our own emotions being strongly stirred by what we hear in the news. It's the way of the golden rule of all major faiths to love our neighbor as ourselves, even when our neighbor seems to us to be deeply offensive. The offering of loving kindness is essentially an invitation for them to be bathed in the same compassion that we feel. And for most people to be bathed in this beautiful energy can have no other effect than to soften any tendency they have towards aggression or what we may regard as immoral or atrocious situations. Perhaps surprisingly, when we come to offer loving kindness for people we may ordinarily find very hard to love, we experience an incredibly positive effect too. This has to do with the torus field, the energy field
mm,
around us.
mm,
This way of praying for the tyrants and the bullies of the world can actually be remarkably uplifting, if at times energetically draining. It may not be easy, but with strength and perseverance, it's possible. For us intention holders, it's important not to ignore.
mm, mm.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
It's also following the logic. If we will peace for all beings, that has to include the tyrants and the
Yes.
bullies as well.
Yes. Yes.
We can't ignore that. Loving kindness is core to my own practice. Although at times, as we had a good discussion about a little incident I was describing earlier, I can find it very hard to put into practice, I have to say.
We're only human.
We're
We're
only
only
human.
human.
We're only human, but we keep trying. I
Mhm.
offer a daily guided meditation applying the principles on the Insight Timer app, as many listeners know, and also wrote extensively about the practice in my book, The Heart of Loving Kindness. I personally believe it's fundamental to virtually everything we do in holding intention. That is, to desire the highest good in any situation which may not be known to us. For people of faith, this means trusting that the God of their own higher power of their understanding will enable the best possible outcome, even if what appears to result may cause us to struggle to understand how the highest good is being served. The focus on loving kindness applies to anyone and anything affected by this conflict. The leaders, administrators, advisors, and military commanders who are front and center of the conflict may quickly come to mind. However, willing loving kindness, of course, applies to all citizens being affected by the conflict, those in the military, and those whose voices are being silenced. It applies too to animals terrified by the exploding of weapons, and the land itself that is being harmed by this exchange. A flow of loving kindness, seeking to bring harmony and a rebalancing wherever there is destruction and disruption.
Think that's really important to remember the animals and the land and everything about our earth.
Yeah. I think it's something also that the likes of me have never really been in a war zone. can't
Hmm.
fully understand it. I was on a call this morning with a lady who lives in Jerusalem who was describing, at the moment the ceasefire is holding, but every day and every night, enormous noises going on above where they are, like a massive firework display, which
Oh,
must be absolutely petrifying for animals as well as for humans. Absolutely.
right. And for the children who are
For the
going to carry
children.
this
Yeah.
trauma
Yes, definitely.
through their lives. Yep. One other approach we can take as events move so quickly is to focus specifically on the various parties who are affected by or sustaining this conflict. These include the traumatized, as we said, displaced, and terrified who live under the threat of attack, like your friend was
Mm,
talking about. For them, while sudden threats may become their focus in any one moment, the ongoing fear and trauma they are suffering continues over a long time scale. It even, as research is showing, continues through generations.
yes, yes.
We might focus attention on the political and military leadership of the three nations involved, as well as those in Lebanon and throughout the Gulf whose countries have come under attack. Those attempting mediation for a lasting peace may also be in our sights, especially. We'll consider some other groups for our focus in just a moment.
And there are mid and long term consequences of the conflict in the Gulf that are holding or worsening over a sustained period. Whatever the day to day change in rhetoric and positioning by the different sides, these include the 1 million people who are said to have been displaced by the exchange of fire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Of course, many who've been terrified by air raids, as we were saying, lost their homes or loved ones, will suffer trauma for potentially decades to come. There are also yet unknown but likely consequences in the midterm. Economically, this is perhaps one of the more obvious ones that we might forecast. The turbulence in oil and gas markets may hasten major structural change, higher global energy pricing, and have a severe and lasting impact on the world economy. One of the intentions we put in the Facebook group this week actually focused on one example already of labor protests in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh against rising living costs as a direct result of fuel supplies already being affected. We are going to be seeing that in Europe for sure very
Yeah,
soon as well.
yeah,
Island
definitely.
island farmers have been on the streets already as well. Higher prices may in turn drive global food insecurity, intensifying existing crises in regions reliant on imported fuel and grain. Humanitarian logistics platforms in the UAE and wider region are already affected, compromising aid pipelines into fragile states. And there are huge unknowns in terms of how the conflicts may change geopolitical relations, possibly threatening the future of NATO and leading to a realignment in trading and defense partnerships and alliances. I was hearing today, I mean, these are all, of course, theories at the moment that if the energy crisis becomes so severe in Europe, for example, that the governments here may be forced ultimately into a negotiation with Russia, which was previously the main supplier of gas. So there's just one unknown that I can see that happening.
Oh, jeez.
You get ultimately you get a test between are you going to support Ukraine or are you going to keep your people who are on the street rioting
Hmm.
because of energy? Who knows where this potentially could end? All of this, of course, are good candidates for our prayers without getting too scaremongering, as it were, but having an open mind. It is, of course, the poorer, import dependent countries who bear disproportionate costs through higher energy and food prices, lost remittances, and disrupted trade. Fertilizer and grain supplies to Africa from the Gulf have already been severely impacted. Africa sources about 17% of its fertilizer imports from Gulf states, and that's around actually goes up to 25% for nitrogen-based products. Rice shipments moving west through the Strait of Hormuz into the Gulf have also plunged by more than 90%, which indirectly threatens African supplies because key exporters to Africa, such as India, Pakistan, and Thailand, rely on Gulf fertilizer and are facing higher costs and uncertainty.
And, we hadn't thought that other things besides oil go through Hermes.
Yeah, well, it's the LPG, the liquid gas as well, is the other
Right,
another
right.
important export. Yeah.
So finally, we might consider ourselves, our loved ones, and the many who are fearful of what is happening in the world. Many of us may be filled with dread, disgust for our leaders, or concern for humanity. Such emotions may come together and may depress or wear us down. While we may be many miles away from the front line, our fears, trembling, and uncertainty is real.
Mm,
Let's now then turn to see where we may apply some of these principles as specific intentions. These are, of course, in addition to the specific immediate events we may spontaneously respond to as we hear about them. And of course, go where you feel led with your prayers. When in doubt or feeling helpless about who or what to pray for those who have faith, simply asking, "Where do you want me to focus my prayers?" and waiting for God's answer is enough.
mm. So, where might we hone in with our intention and prayers? As always, this is the point we will bookmark in the show notes if you want to come back to it. As always, after each intention that we suggest, allowing time, pausing to allow time to properly reflect and hold intention. So, let's just take a moment just to settle, become present. See if you can find a connection with your core, your center. Might help to close your eyes for a moment if that's safe and feels comfortable, and noticing the physical connection you have with the seat, the ground, with Mother Earth. Opening ourselves now to these intentions. We ask for an outflowing of mercy for all who are suffering because of the conflict in the Gulf, for them to know and have reassurance of divine promise, whatever their physical suffering and loss.
We will that those living under threat of attack have courage and wisdom to know how best to protect themselves and their loved ones.
We pray for wisdom for leaders, diplomats, and military decision makers, including international actors who may exert influence either within or beyond the public domain, and also for those whose national security is directly threatened by the conflict, especially in the Arabian Peninsula and Lebanon.
We ask for wisdom for those seeking to mediate a path to a just, durable peace across the wider Middle East. We will that those who come to such talks do so with a resolve to find such a peace and with an open readiness to truth telling and having the courage to choose a nonviolent path.
We ask for those seeking and implementing post conflict arrangements to will for fair and sound governance, to implement what is agreed, and to commit to staying that course.
We will that the wounded, bereaved, and traumatized in the Gulf receive comfort, healing, and the practical help they need.
We pray that refugees displaced by the conflict will be held in protective light, welcomed and supported in their host communities.
We ask that there will be a will among Gulf nations to resist a move to draconian restrictions on free speech and civil freedoms under a pretext of tightening domestic security.
We pray for wisdom and courage for those in the military, including both those who are required to obey orders and those having to give orders that may not sit well with their consciences.
We ask that we receive the strength to stay strong when we are troubled by the news, inviting compassion and being mindful that through our prayers and intentions, we do have impact.
Mm. It was occurring to me as we were reflecting on these intentions, we said that the opportunity is there, of course, to pause after each one. We've explained the technical issue of having long periods of silence before that we'd not ordinarily like to include. But why don't we put these in the show notes this week, all of these?
Yes.
I
Yes.
think they are very useful to refer back to in what is such
Hmm.
an unfolding situation. And of course, listeners may well have their own intentions, prayers that they would add to this. But these are kind of ongoing, aren't they? They're more not just in the moment, kind of in their focus. So this week, as we reflect on how we can pray for what is a constantly changing situation in the Gulf, we suggest offering pure loving kindness as our main intention. We will that all beings who are prosecuting war in the Gulf or who are directly impacted by such actions will be bathed in pure, compassionate light. Please join us in holding this. And of course, if you're familiar with the usual loving kindness meta method, you might want to welcome loving kindness for yourself and indeed
Mhm.
for others who you love unconditionally before you feel maybe able to extend this to everyone. But let's hope that loving kindness can really touch some of those characters who are very prominent in the
Yes,
daily
and
headlines.
have grace with yourself as you offer these intentions and you find it difficult or you find moments in the day that are difficult. We're only human. And just know that we love you, all of our listeners, right?
Absolutely.
So that about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group. We'd love that if you could do that.
Mm.
And for live intention holding in Clive's daily insight timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out too for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us and holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
Thank you. Go well. Stay safe.
and remember, we are more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Bintz and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.